Hi everyone, in this video we are going to talk about fair use and what exactly that means for us. So fair use is when we are legally allowed to use intellectual property that has been copyrighted. So basically ways in which we are allowed to violate copyright protections that are technically legal. So it's not necessarily a violation of copyright and other types of intellectual property mechanisms, intellectual property protection mechanisms. So the four major questions that we ask ourselves when we're trying to decide whether or not something is fair use is, what is the purpose of the copy? So what is the purpose or character of use? So how are we copying it? What are we copying it for? That's the big question. What are we copying it for? So if we're copying this for educational purposes, this is generally something that is allowed. Other types of copying that is allowed is things such as mashups. So when we're actually doing transformative work on a particular piece that we are copying, so we can take something else, we can change it in some way, and then we can redistribute that, and that is allowed. Now, the other thing we have to ask is, what is the nature of the original? So what is the original piece of work, and what is it that it was meant for and is designed for? What is its general property? So is it a book? Is it a movie? Is it a piece of art, right? These are the types of questions we ask about that particular piece. The next question we ask is, how much is being copied? So we want to know how much of the work we are using in this new copy that we're creating. So are we using the entirety of it, or are we using just a small little piece of the original work? In something like a mashup, for example, we're probably only using a small little bit. This points us toward probably fair use of that particular work. Now, if we're using the entirety of the original, that calls into question whether or not that is legal and whether or not that is fair use. The last question that we ask is, how does this affect the market? What we mean by that is, how does this affect the market for the original work? Is this going to change how much money the original work could get? Are we interfering with its chances of producing income for the person that holds copyright or other intellectual property protections over that particular piece? This is really important because this is one of the key factors in determining fair use, is whether or not we're interfering with its ability to make money. So there's two major questions. The two major questions out of these four is the first one, which is, what is the purpose of the copy? And the last one, which is, how does it impact the market? But all these questions are really important in different ways. It's just that the two that we usually hear about and that we consider when we're first deciding whether or not this is fair use are those particular options. Now, there's some other laws on the books that are helpful in us navigating what is fair use. The first is the Audio Home Recording Act. So the Audio Home Recording Act came out in 1992, and it protects your use, your fair use of basically media copies. Oops. Fair use of copies in the way that you can use it for personal use, as long as you're copying something for personal use, you're recording it for your own personal use in your own home or on your own devices. This is something you can do. You can record a movie, you can record a TV show, you can record whatever you want, as long as you're not redistributing that work or sharing it with anybody else. This is particularly important for people who were recording videos or shows from TV onto things like VHS or onto things like DVDs. that is allowed, and that was determined by the Audio Home Recording Act. Now, in another lawsuit, RIAA versus Diamond Multimedia, a company sought to prevent this from being something that we could do. They wanted to restrict fair use on MP3 files in mobile settings, so on basically MP3 players. They said that this was a violation of the Audio Home Recording Act because you were taking it outside of your home. Now, the lawsuit actually ruled in favor of this being legal and fair use, which of course increased the proclivity for people to actually download MP3s and put them onto mobile devices, which means now you can do that with your phone. You can do that with any other kind of mobile device as long as you are not sharing that work with anybody else. It's really important that, again, this is about personal use, right? Do not share it with anyone else and do not use it for commercial purposes. Those are the two important aspects there. And of course, we also have digital rights management, or DRM, which now restricts our ability to actually copy things. So the idea behind DRM is that we want to restrict, companies want to be able to restrict either who can copy or how many copies can be made of particular pieces of work. So this is often around movies and music. Those are the two big ones. And this is enforced through the DMCA, or the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And now this makes it illegal to circumvent encryption on media, such as, MP3 players or DVDs or whatever it is that you wanted to copy. And this made it illegal even if you were doing this for fair use. So now it is illegal for us to circumvent encryption even for fair use purposes or for other purposes through the DMCA. And this is mostly because companies wanted to have DRM, or digital rights management, on their digital media that they distribute. So this has a lot of consequences, and we'll look at that in the next video. And it's really important that you have an understanding of how DRM and DMCA impacts your ability to have fair use of media.